So today I want to talk about grooming. This has been something I've been seeing a lot of online, a lot of accusations of grooming flying left and right. Specifically, I've seen a lot of gender critical people and those of us who raise concerns about gender ideology, those of us who don't believe in gender, those of us who don't believe that transition is healthy. Basically, those of us who are just no transgender ideology, transition, transgender, the very idea of transgender is a no-go for us, okay? So those, this kind of group, generally speaking, has been using groomer a lot to refer to trans rights advocates and trans ideology and people who believe in trans ideology. Specifically, they mean that grooming in the sense that trans ideology with underage kids, so teens and even kids younger than teens. When they say grooming, what they mean, at least what it seems to me, is grooming in the sexual meaning of grooming. So before we go any further, let's look at some definitions, okay? So in the Merriam-Webster dictionary here, groom, a person responsible for feeding, exercising, and stabling of horses. One of several officers of the English royal household. Okay. Another, groom, groomed, grooming, to clean and maintain the appearance of an animal. We covered that, right? To make neat or attractive, to get into readiness for a specific objective. Okay. As far as the mainstream definition of grooming, it's not of a sexual nature. However, it has been used for quite a while to refer to a person who, well, here, you know what? Let me go to RAIN's website and let's talk about what they say about grooming. So, sexual assault, grooming, know the warning signs. Okay. One tool common to those who sexually abuse kids is grooming. Manipulative behaviors that the abuser uses to gain access to a potential victim, coerce them into agreeing to the abuse, and reduce the risk of being caught. While these tactics are not used most often against, while these tactics are used most often against younger kids, teens, and vulnerable adults are also at risk. Grooming can take place online or in person. It's usually employed by a family member or someone else in the victim's circle of trust, such as a coach, teacher, youth group leader, or others who naturally have some interaction with the victim. Okay. So basically, grooming in the sexual sense for sexual abuse is manipulating the person, the child of the person, into agreeing to the abuse. Even though, we understand that no one agrees to abuse, but you can be very manipulated into it. And I firmly believe that, because I think a lot of the way that the very idea of being transgender, the very idea of transition, the very idea of trans ideology basically is a coercive, it's coercive in making some people hurt themselves, basically. It's coercing people into hurting themselves and agreeing and thinking that they're making the decision to hurt themselves. And no one really wants to hurt themselves, right? People only hurt themselves when they think it's going to alleviate pain, or they're in so much pain that that's a way to, well, I guess you could say suicide is hurting yourself. That's to get away from pain, to avoid pain. So, unless the pain is so strong that the person views the other pain as the lesser of the pain, like that's the way it's going to go. And I mean, that was how I looked at it. I knew that surgeries were going to be painful. I knew that taking testosterone was going to change me, change my body, I knew there could be some repercussions from that, but I really believed that that was the best option that I had to alleviate my emotional distress. Okay. So the problem with the grooming I've seen being thrown just left and right all over the place is it's overused. It's way overused to the point where it loses any of its real meaning. And it's a serious meaning. I mean, grooming a child and grooming a person is for sexual assault. It's very serious. Now, if you're going to use this definition here for the Merriam-Webster, to get into readiness for a specific objective, okay, that might apply. For example, was being groomed as a presidential candidate. All right, I mean, you could use it for what's the specific objective for transition, for getting people to believe in transgender ideology and transition. Well, we could say there's the medical industry part. The medical industry and pharmaceutical companies are going to make money off of us. You could say it's manipulating and grooming people into not believing what they see with their eyes, not believing in reality. But the thing is about that is not unique to transgender ideology. We see this all the time everywhere. Religion is a very good example of this. Explain to me exactly the difference between telling a 4-year-old that if they don't believe in Jesus, they're going to go to this awful place when they die and burn in the most horrible pain for the rest of their existence. That's not a very nice thing to tell kids. Telling them that some of their just natural way of being, or their sexuality, or, you know, having independent thought and reason outside of what they've been taught means they are going to suffer greatly, and this God, this entity in the sky, is going to torture them forever. In my opinion, that's some real messed up shit to tell a kid too. The way grooming is used for the most part with transgender ideology is basically manipulating kids into believing in things, in a faith-based belief, in things that are not based in reality and that are not based in science. Religion is no different from that. So if you're going to go off about all this grooming and how horrible grooming is from the LGBT community, then you're going to go ahead and you need to throw religion in there too. You need to throw, let's throw some government in there too. Let's throw the United States government in there. Let's throw whatever, you know, major governments from around the world. Because they also use propaganda to groom kids and groom young people into going and fighting wars overseas. The list goes on and on. So is there a pedophilic side to trans belief system and transgender ideology and getting, you know, some of the, yeah, I think there's some evidence that there is a pedophilic element in there. Specifically, this belief that kids can make life-altering decisions equal to those of adults. That right there is a huge red flag, because you're basically saying a kid can consent. A kid can consent to having parts of their body removed. Then a kid can consent to sex with an adult, right? So knocking away, getting rid of the idea of kids not being able to consent because they are not emotionally and mentally mature enough to make good decisions and critical reasoning in the long term, taking away that, no, it's not, what word am I looking for? It's not gatekeeping, but that protection that as society we have agreed to do, you know, to take away that protection is definitely suspicious and definitely not in any child's best interest or health. So yeah, you know, pedophiles have been known to do this for a long time. Even pedophile organizations have argued the fact that kids can consent. You know, the whole, you know, man-boy love group or whatever the hell they were called. Those disgusting perverts basically believe that, you know, a fucking 11-year-old boy can consent to being raped by a man, basically, you know. And that's just simply not true. We have to protect kids. Society, you know, I'm a liberal. I'm a social, I can be a social justice warrior in, I think, the better sense than what's used now. But, you know, I've been a voting Democrat and a progressive my whole life. And I do believe that community matters. And I do believe that it does take a village to raise a kid. And that we are all adults should be thinking about what is in the best interest of our young and vulnerable little humans. That said, it is not the state's place to come in and raise your kids either. Parents, the parent or the guardian, whoever is raising that kid, whether they're good or bad, does make the decisions for that kid. Now, we do have, you know, things in place in society to protect kids from abusive parents. That's a whole separate subject, though. Taking the premise that the parent is not abusing the child themselves, then the parent needs to make the ultimate decision for that kid. And what a lot of the trans rights advocates are coming in here and saying is that kids can consent. So that's a big red flag. But I really think grooming is being overused. It's being thrown around way too much. And that's hurting our cause. It is not helping it. Because grooming is generally seen in the sexual sense. And why there's an element to that, like I've already discussed. I don't think that's the main objective necessarily. And some people do think that's the main objective. But I think for the most part, most people who believe in transgender ideology, who believe that you can be trans, they're not doing it because they want to sexually abuse kids. That they really think they're doing something good. Like they really believe that there's an innate transness and they're helping. And that's the fucked up part, is so often people think they're helping and they are not helping. And that's why it's so important to have reason and logic and be able to listen to the other side and have conversations with people you disagree with, which sadly our society has seemed to lose just all ability to do that. So don't throw grooming at everybody. I mean, this has become so popular that now we have like Democratic politicians and major LGBT organizations talking about it. And, you know, there is a fine line, because historically gays and lesbians, especially gay men, have been accused, have been accused of wanting to turn kids gay. I mean, when I'm only in my 40s, and this was definitely something I heard when I came out in my youth. This is very prevalent. This was something I grew up with on the Christian conservative right. This very, very staunch belief that homosexuals, in their opinion, homosexuals were grooming kids into being homosexual so that those people could have sex with them. So that's a very, you know, let's be very careful. And whether we like it or not, for the most part, the T is attached to LGB. Most people see it attached. And you have to be very careful when we start throwing groomer around. Because you remember, you are implicating homosexuals in that too, whether you want to or not. We need to be very specific about what we're talking about. We need to be very specific about breaking apart the LGB, the lesbian, gay, and bisexual, same-sex attracted individuals, homosexual individuals, that's a sexual orientation. We need to be very careful about breaking that off from the T, from transgender, because transgender is not the same. It is not. And we can go into a whole nother video about that. But it's not the same thing. And just to be very specific and point that out. Having a van, a big truck van with like, you know, like a screen or, you know, picture attached to it, driving through a town, showing a drag queen, and then saying, you know, groomer associated with that, you've done nothing. You've absolutely done nothing to help this cause. Because the vast majority of people who see that, either they're going to be right-wing conservatives, religious conservatives, and mind you, not all people on the right are against homosexuality. Not at all. I've known many who are not. But generally speaking, and historically speaking, the right has generally been against it. Definitely politically speaking. So someone on the right's going to see that and they're going to go, damn straight, they just agree with you. You didn't change anybody's mind. You didn't help the situation. Someone on the left is going to look at that and go, they're going to immediately think back to when homosexuals were being lumped into that. And they're going to lump homosexuals into that too. They're going to think that's what you're saying. And that's what people are saying when they say groomer, because they have no idea about all this other information. And I really think we need to think about that and be reasonable. Of course, I'm asking people to be reasonable, and I know that's probably not going to happen because nobody's reasonable anymore. It's all inflammatory shit left and right. And I got to tell you, it is frustrating as hell, especially as someone who maybe wrongfully believed that being progressive meant being open-minded. And not open-minded like everything goes. Open-minded like, all right, let me hear what you have to say. Let me look at that. You say you have evidence? Let me look at it. Let me try to make up my own mind about this, you know? Let's agree to disagree. I love that one. If we're going to live together in a society, we need to learn that agree to disagree. Just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean they're the devil. Both sides are doing this, and it's just completely unproductive. Anyways, that's my tangent about groomers, and throwing that shit around. Stop doing that. You're not helping anybody. And if anything, I mean, this transgender ideology is going to backfire on homosexuals anyways. So be very careful when you're using that kind of perspective. All right, thank you for listening to my tangent.